It's important for me to bring Yukon back to Israel. Uluru. It was really good and sad. That day was a bit sorry for me. I was thinking what I done back in the day.
We got to teach our children. We got to bring our generation to learn, to understand what been happening here. Huh?
The family of Anangu man, Yukun, have waited almost 90 years to lay him to rest. Yukun's remains are being returned to the place he was killed almost a century ago. The events surrounding Yukun's death have long been disputed. A black telling at odds with white history. This story of Yukun's death begins in 1934. Constable Bill McKinnon was stationed in the tiny colonial outpost that was Alice Springs. The Queenslander was an amateur photographer, a prolific diarist, and had an appetite for adventure.
He was caught up in the myth, the romantic myth of the centre. McKinnon sees himself as entering a mythology of Central Australia that he wants to become a central figure in.
Violence and racism were ever present. Just a few years before McKinnon arrived in the Territory, more than 100 Aboriginal people were killed by police in the Coniston massacre.
This is a frontier. It's a frontier town. And it's a case of many people, many of the whites, thinking that they have to demonstrate their power and might to show who's in control.
In 1934, Bill McKinnon was tasked with investigating the murder of an Aboriginal station hand. McKinnon set off on what would be a 3-month expedition across the vast expanses of the Red Desert with 2 trackers and a few camels in an attempt to find the killer. It was at a camp east of Uluru where McKinnon arrested 6 men. One of them was Yukun.
They are innocent. They are innocent men. But at the time, he believed that they were suspects. He then starts to immediately extract confessions from those 6 men that he's arrested. And there's evidence in McKinnon's journals of brutal intimidation at that point.
At dawn, while McKinnon slept, his prisoners escaped.
For 5 days, Bill McKinnon and his trackers covered a huge amount of distance, 80 kilometres, possibly even more, trying to find the men that had made a break for freedom. Now, Yukun was injured, and it was his trail of blood that led trackers to here, the storied Mutijulu waterhole.
Yukun hid in a cave and threw a rock at McKinnon. The officer said he drew his pistol and shot back, claiming he fired without aim. And while the others escaped, Yukun died.
pech mana ballo ka palo yana man kor pa bani kampo kochupa na pakara bolo ara kor korja.
An investigation was launched into the death of Yukun. An inquiry toured the desert, with the accused McKinnon acting as the guide and the cook.
All of the men who were part of that inquiry were known to McKinnon. I think that it was pretty difficult to think that that inquiry wasn't compromised in some way.
McKinnon was found guilty of brutality towards the men, but on Yukun's death, the Board of Inquiry was torn.
It really came down with a very, what would seem at face value, contradictory decision, which was that McKinnon's shooting of Yukun was legally justified but unwarranted.
The inquiry exonerated Bill McKinnon, and one of the men involved in the probe decided to take Yukun's bones back to Adelaide to be studied. Yukun's family had no idea his body had been exhumed. Historian and author Mark McKenna is back in the Red Centre, having spent 5 years researching the death of Yukun and the life of Bill McKinnon.
I was following two histories, two tellings, if you like, of this shooting, of this moment. And what I was trying to do was to actually place those Aboriginal oral histories and the whitefella tellings in conversation with one another.
McKinnon retired from the force in the 1960s, a decorated officer. His pictures still adorn the walls of this Territory roadhouse, his chequered past seemingly erased. The death of Yukun had a profound effect on Aboriginal people in Central Australia, a traumatic event that's seldom spoken about.
We're about to arrive at a place called Arionga, or Uju as it's known locally. It means the place within the nest in language, and it's here where Yukun's descendants have agreed to speak publicly for the first time.
Maygo chitro putakangani. Palon jananya. Jana mala gonyano.
Abraham Paulson is the most senior male descendant of Yukun. He also has family ties to one of the men captured with Yukun, who later escaped.
Banya anang rangan tuda innocent tuda.
Abraham's surviving family member, Joseph Donald, settled in Arionga after the incident and made sure he passed down the story of what he saw.
When we were teenage and used to go to school and used to cook breakfast, lunch, dinner for us all. No one didn't come. He was working here.
Joseph Donald also told his story to a local filmmaker in 1986, a few years before he died.
Kondin. Jangan lo builan bago jo lara tarba.
Joy Kunia is another family member who's been longing for justice and the return of Yukun's remains to Uluru.
Anya palo nya neranga kundino kolping. Mono balanya katera chono jono. Mono ya ko chunya nara balanya manja gading.
Aboriginal people across Central Australia felt strongly Yukun wasn't killed accidentally, as history has officially recorded it. They believe he was murdered. In a search for the truth, Mark McKenna tracked down Bill McKinnon's daughter, who was unaware her father was harbouring a dark secret.
She very kindly said to me that she had some things in the garage at home of her father's, that I could look through. In that garage was every journal that Bill McKinnon had kept for his entire life.
Mark McKenna found a diary entry written the morning after the shooting, and in it, an admission.
There in his own hand was the statement, "I fired to hit." So at that point, I knew that he had been lying to the Commonwealth Board of Inquiry in 1935.
For the family, the confession is vindication, and now with Yukkun's bones returned to country, the ceremony is a chance to heal.
Ngayon mo ko rin palo niya. Malakang ko chuna ko jaw. Arang kato. Mono kojop kolen che malakora ara kora jota.
But the legacy of frontier violence persists in the territory.
Yukun nga ko juwiya. Uwan kara. Mura chutanga. Tana nyala jingani.
Kolen matawa sometimes chukur bujure anga be ko anga be test in custody holy things wanga kolen da kon nanya ngana ban generation na mala jako.
Really, there needs to be a reckoning, I think, on the part of white Australia. It's another example. There are many others, but it's a powerful example of the need for that reckoning.
Universities are places of teaching and learning, and there is much to learn from Yukkun's story of how in
At the ceremony, Richard Logan from the university which held Yukkun's bones apologised.
His remains were kept in an institution not as a man, but as a scientific specimen. This is a shameful story.
John Pa Koro.
Two solemn faces at the event mark another significant step towards reconciliation. They're the great nephews of Bill McKinnon.
The history that hasn't been told, that needs to be told, and if the people that have the links to that need to be brave enough to own that.
I'm happy he came and stand with us.
White and black history is slowly starting to reconcile, but reflecting on the journey to get here still brings pain.
Is there peace for the family now?
Yeah, it's peace.